Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. All right. Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie. With me, as always, is my co-host, the power behind the throne, so to speak, Samuel Sanchez. Sam, how you doing?
Not too bad, brother. Definitely, you're the jalapenos to your nacho cheese. You know.
So you dug out from under. You all thawed out from last week.
Man, what a crazy kickoff to 2020, brother! I got to tell you, I'm thawed. The pipes are thawed. Everybody made it through, so we got to be blessed a little bit that we made it through. It was a little touch and go there. Yes. No water, no power for days. I'm sure you experienced that too.
Yeah, so we want to apologize for not bringing a podcast last week, but no power means no internet, means no podcast. So you can thank the fine folks at the ERCOT utility company there, or your utility co-op there, and that manages our utilities here in Texas. So
they're doing bang up business there, bang up job.
So, well, we were originally going to pivot today and go on to some new different subjects, but we've gotten such strong feedback with our last podcast dealing with gun issues, gun laws, gun rights, all that stuff. We thought we'd hit it again and start talking some more about. We've gotten a ton of feedback from females, concerning the uptick in women buying guns. We've gotten feedback from business owners, concerning their rights, gun rights, just looking at gun sales. It's been absolutely staggering. We'll go through that in a minute, but we thought we'd go ahead and give the people what they want, so to speak, and talk some more about this issue, which is obviously gaining traction with it seems like with every crazy news event that comes about.
Yeah, the more we kind of go backwards in time, the more people are really concerned about, do I need one of those? If I don't have one, if I have one, can I use it? When can I use it? When can I carry it? So it's really, really been an interesting, year and a half as far as how the world dynamic has really played into gun ownership and gun purchases and really the laws that are getting people entangled.
Let's talk about this for a second. So I did some little bit of research, and the uptick in gun sales. I'll give you an example, like the uptick in background checks for people buying guns in January of 2020 was 2.7 million. In January of 2021, it was 4.3 million. So it's up, over 80% from where it was. Or actually more than that. And then it was up, that's up from 3.9 million in December of 2020. So overall, there were 39.7 million FBI background checks done in 2020 on gun purchases. So, and it's not just, right-wing bubbas that are buying guns. Everybody's buying guns right now. The left, the right, everybody's buying guns. Everybody's, one of the most popular is the AR-15. Try going to find one of those at the gun store nowadays, or better yet, try to go find some ammunition for an AR-15.
Yeah, which is the crazy thing. Obviously, that's a whole nother subject. Is the second tier of gun control is ammo control. So. But we'll deal with that another day. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And really, those facts are pretty staggering, those statistics. When you look at, why people feel that they need them. And obviously, they're going out and buying them. What I think that raises a lot of questions that we've been seeing come in after the last couple of podcasts is, what can I do with it? When can I use it? When can I carry it? Where do I store it? other than the government wanting a map of where you're going to put it.
Which closet you put your gun safe in, right?
Draw me a map, can you please, and put an X exactly where it is, and don't move it so that I can always find it if I need to. No, but I mean, really, when you look at that, I mean, just taking women and at the onset of this, a lot of our female listeners have been, emailing us, contacting us, and saying like, hey, I'm interested in purchasing a weapon, or I own a weapon and I don't have the license to carry. And so everybody kind of understands, if you're listening to this and you're like, what the hell is he talking about, license to carry? It's basically what we used to consider a concealed handgun license. License to carry is basically just your opportunity, because Texas is an open carry state. What we mean by that is that, it's like the old Wild West. So you want to put it on your hip and walk around and go to Chipotle and pick up your bowl, you can do it. Yeah, I've seen it happen. I've seen people walking with like, AKs and ARs, and I'm like, man, they're really serious about their Chipotle. But that's what open carry means, not concealed. And what we used to call it a concealed handgun license, that transitioned a couple of years back to a license to carry, which is something that you have to do, a class for, go through like some, a fire range test to get certified to be able to carry that firearm concealed, meaning that you can put it in your bag and carry it with you wherever you go. You can get, an inside waist, holster so that you can carry that firearm with you or concealed underneath your coat. Wherever you want to take it, minus some exceptions. And we're going to kind of touch on a couple of those, because the second side of that is, all these business owners who we represent who are like, hey, with everybody carrying guns, like, can I keep them out? What do I got to do to keep them out? Do I want to keep them out?
Let's go back. Let's go back to your Chipotle example. I'm the proprietor of a Chipotle, and I want to, let's say I don't want firearms in my shop. What do I need to do?
Well, you have to, the postings are huge. You can, if it is a privately owned or privately run establishment, restrict the individual from bringing firearms onto your premises. Now, obviously, that's a touchy subject, because obviously a lot of the people, especially in a state like Texas, who have that, are pretty law abiding and probably frequent your establishment. So doing that can have some financial ramifications. But on top of that, what are you going to do? Are you going to go up and you're going to physically frisk people before they come in the door and say, hey, I want to make sure you're not packing today? It's not a speakeasy in the 20s. It's Chipotle. And so most big retailers, nationwide retailers, have really looked at it and said, hey, we're going to put these postings up that say that you can't carry them open carry. And so they haven't, most of them, restricted the license to carry individuals who are able to conceal those weapons and keep them with them on their person.
I mean, since we live in Texas, we've gotten the 87th regular legislative session has begun this year. And it looks like they've got a number of different gun and gun related proposals up in front of the legislature this time. It's one proposal is a firearm, dealing with firearms during a disaster. This would remove the governor's authority to suspend or limit the sale or dispensing or transportation of firearms during a declared disaster. So the law as it stands right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the governor can decide, well, we're having since there's this riot going on, or a hurricane, or a massive blizzard, since there's this going on, we're going to limit an individual's right to carry a gun in this particular declared disaster county, because the looting's crazy, whatever else is going on. There's a high instances of crime. We're going to limit the sale, dispensing, and transportation of firearms during this, declared disaster.
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate.
Now, there's a proposal. The proposal is to eliminate that, eliminate the governor's authority on that. So, I guess they still want you to be able to carry your, what I would call, heater during times of crisis, which makes, depending on which side of the argument you're on, it makes sense. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you may need that to protect yourself, right?
Well, and probably that's the time you'll need it most, the time when law enforcement has their hands full. And I can't remember where I heard it, but
And it wouldn't necessarily be a limitation on carrying it. It looks like it would be a limitation on
on
selling.
sales. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they just basically say, hey, gun shops are going to shut you down for right now because it's too crazy and we don't want
But
new
as
gun
we've
owners
seen,
walking the streets with firearms.
but as we've seen with COVID, um, COVID, we had a declared disaster in I don't know how many counties in 2020, and that was for months on end. So, I mean, theoretically, a governor could, limit the sale of firearms if they were so inclined, just based on the COVID disaster.
Yeah, and the political disposition of your governor obviously can lend some concern behind that. Obviously, right now we're pretty red state, but and a pretty gun friendly state. That doesn't mean that'll always be the case. Obviously trends change. Individuals
Sure.
who get in there, and you never know. We get somebody who's a little, dictatorial and says, I don't want them, and how can I limit them? That's sure one way to do it.
Okay, so let's talk about gun sales. There's a proposal to criminalize the sale of the private sale of a firearm without utilizing a national instant criminal background check. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have an ability to do a national instant criminal background check at my house. If I'm going to sell a gun to a neighbor or something like that, I don't know if I have that capability at home.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's pretty far reaching as well. Talk about like a lot of these firearms are, heirlooms are handed down generation to generation. You're gonna do a background check on your cousin, your nephew, no, turn that into the FBI and say, hey, do this for me, will you, just to make sure he's fine. But that's really kind of where they're going. They want to make sure to try to close the loophole, and that's one of them, of gun ownership without registration, and that's really, how do you close that?
Another proposal is to require the sale of a private firearm to become by essentially only be able to be conducted by a federal firearms license, so a dealer. So if I wanted to sell you my my 9mm, you and I would have to go down to the gun store and say, gun store, I want to sell my gun to him, and I'm sure they're not going to take a middleman fee or anything like that for the sale, right?
Oh yeah, of course not. Of course not. But if they'll even do it.
This one seems pretty sensible. It's a proposal that makes it a violation of Texas law to provide false or misleading information on an ATF form when you're buying a gun. That seems like a sensible law there.
State and federal. It's already a federal offense, but sure, let's go ahead. The law is all about redundancy, man. So I'm cool with that.
And then there's a proposal to require the gun dealer to notify law enforcement if a federal firearms transaction was denied by the FBI background check.
Oh.
So,
yeah, I mean, just the reporting mechanisms. I understand really kind of where they're going. It's interesting that it's every legislative session that they're going to bring in. There's always going to be new bills,
and you tell me whether any of this stuff is actually going to pass. I mean, oftentimes there's hundreds and hundreds of bills that are offered in a legislative session in Texas, given they only meet every 2 years. So very few actually get through the rigmarole and turn into a law, right?
Yeah, for sure. I always try to tell people though, if you're interested, make sure you're reading them. If you don't like them, make sure you contact your legislator. Be active, because it's those little small innocuous ones that chip away at whatever you're trying to preserve. And if it's that you want to preserve that ownership and the freedom to be able to pass it on, sell it, do whatever you want to with it, it's your property, then that's probably something you're going to want to kind of look at and follow and make sure. It may not ever make it out of committee, which it probably won't, but you just never know. So you just have to be ever aware and informed. So it's good to get that kind of information, brother.
This is one that may hit a little bit closer to home for you. There's a proposal out there that would prohibit the carrying of a handgun by a license holder on a college campus.
Yeah, so that's interesting. They got a lot of beef when it first came out that, that they were like, hey, look, we're not going to restrict it on college campuses. And really I served at the governor's discretion on a college board, board of regents, and we really dealt with that issue. And there was a lot of concern around the conversation of, how are we going to do that? But if you look historically at where these shootings are happening, a lot of them are on campuses. I mean, you can, put pin dots all across the country where these things have happened. And so, I think the idea behind it was really to allow individuals who've gone through this training, who've, been able to obtain this certification, or that they're just, they're keeping it in their, in their car or whatever it is.
I guess
That they have the
the
ability to
question,
maintain.
I guess the question I would have for that particular law would be, okay, how many of these shootings are taking place by people who are licensed, LTC, license holders? That would be the better question. I mean, this is a restriction on a person who's already gone through training, who's got a license to carry, and ostensibly has been through the safety training, knows how to handle the firearm, that sort of thing. So, my concern would be, the person that picks up the gun somewhere and comes onto the campus.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really, I think Texas's open carry position is really a ideal of equalization, right? If you equalize the playing field, then it's less likely that people are going to resort to that, because if you pull it, you never know who's around the corner that's also going to pull theirs in defense of somebody else. And so, I think that was really kind of the justification as they go into campuses. I understand that, the hallowed halls of higher education are places that, the last place you really want any type of violence to break out, especially gun violence. But, these are also places that, as we're learning, people are very, very susceptible. And, if you're susceptible from an outside threat, then a lot of times, how do you equalize it? Well, most of these college campuses have, their own police forces, they're armed. Although they don't usually typically carry those firearms with them when they're going to report to stuff, but sometimes they do. So, there's just a lot of mechanisms. They've said, they're professors. So, are those professors licensed to carry? Do they, keep it, handy? How is that all transpiring to kind of level it out? But it's all complicated.
I agree. And I don't know if you've noticed the trend, at least in the criminal law down here in Houston. I know it's kind of the same in Dallas, as they've had a lot of the new district attorney that we have in Houston has decided that there, certain offenders that get arrested don't need to have bail set. Mm-hmm. So they're released on PR bonds and different things. And there's no bond. They're not sitting in jail. Violent crimes are happening, continuously by the same offenders because they're not being locked up. It does happen in Dallas as well. There's, like kind of this new no bail trend. Whether you agree with that or not, it's happening. And whether you agree with it or not, there has been at least one shooting of a police officer by a person who probably shouldn't have been released from jail, but was, because of this new kind of trend that's trending with respect to no bail. And not keeping some of these offenders in jail for a long period of time before their trial or whatever. Now, I think that, personally, I think that's increased the, people's feelings of need for wanting to go buy a handgun, because in a lot of instances, the police are sometimes 10, 15 minutes away, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And, you may want that weapon to defend yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's especially what I've been hearing from a lot of the females that I've talked to is, they have that, they feel a little bit more secure, because of a sticky situation, maybe walking to their car, going to their car from a shopping center, going from work, or, something where they might have to cross a dark parking lot, or, things like that, where they might be alone, or they might be in a situation where, they could get accosted. And, I think that extra layer of protection gives a lot of people security.
Absolutely. It's like I told my daughter is, the police are for enforcing laws. They're not your bodyguards. So they're not going to follow you around and make sure that you're safe. You have to have the ability to protect yourself and to be able to, do things in a critical situation that'll help yourself out of that situation to a safe zone. And, whether, it's carrying, being able to carry, being able to use a firearm, being able to use self-defense to protect yourself. Because honestly, especially with COVID, I've heard this a lot and from different sources that, we're more detached as a society, whether it's the digital age, whether it's COVID, whether it's, all these shutdowns, whatever it may be. More and more, you're seeing people get into these encounters with people who are witnessing, and they're not doing anything about it. They're not coming to your aid. They're just sitting there. They don't want to get involved, or they're fearful themselves. They're like, hey, I'm just going to protect me and mine. And so if you're going to count that, hey, there's going to be a police officer right next to you if something's happening, then you're probably in for a rude awakening at some point. You really, should contemplate what happens. And to your point, Bryan, when you said, hey, look, emergency situations, that's when things really go haywire. How many times have we seen, when there's no, like you see runs on grocery stores, right? Sure. There's no bread, there's no milk, there's no nothing. When resources get scarce, that's when people really kind of, sad to say, but they don't go and like, hey, I'm going to help my neighbor. Most of the time it's like, it's me and mine, not you and yours. So,
they call that marauding, I think. They call that marauding. No, but you're absolutely right. I mean, unfortunately, the kind of love thy neighbor thing is, in some instances, you see some great acts of humanity, but in some instances, it's, in 2020, I'm hoping it was an outlier kind of year, but I think we saw more violence and civil unrest in 2020 than we've seen in, a number of years. For whatever reason. I mean, there was things happening every 5 seconds. There seems like there was a riot or looting or something going on. And people see that stuff on the news and they see it reported constantly 24/7. On every news channel, there's a truck drives into a crowd. People pull the guy out of the truck hits people in the crowd, all kinds of, just violence. And I don't know, there's no solution to it other than, sometimes you got to protect yourself. And some of these shop owners that were getting their shops burned down in some of these cities, the police were not available to be able to come defend their shop. And, so it gets burned to the ground. I mean, that's just how it is. Unless they're there and they have some way to protect themselves. And I'm not necessarily advocating using a weapon, using deadly force to protect property, but at the same time, if you're in the store, your family is in the store, that's your livelihood. You got to do what you got to do, I think.
Yeah, and I think that Texas is one of those states that really affords you the opportunity to do that. And we've talked a little bit about Texas being a stand your ground or a castle doctrine state. And
it's interesting that you bring that up, because there was a push by one of the representatives to do away with that stand your ground or castle law. I don't think that's going anywhere, but
and there's really a nationwide, there's this, and I don't even want to call it an undercurrent. I would say it's a pretty large movement to really try to repeal, these doctrines, these laws that afford individuals the right to not have to retreat. And what we're talking about in that situation, guys, is that, in Texas, if somebody threatens you, there's no reason for you to run. If you feel like, hey, I'm threatened, my family's threatened, and you need to take action, there's no retreat required. In other states, potentially they'd say, hey, you have to, if there's an exit strategy available to you where you can take it without, you can run and not get into a fight or get into this gun shootout, then you have an obligation to take it. If not, then you run the risk of potential conviction or civil liability in association with those actions. And so in Texas, we really look at it and say, like, hey, if you're threatened and you have to stand your ground, you're able to do that. And a castle doctrine is really like in your house, right? So do you have, what is it if you're threatened in your home? There's a riot and people are, starting to loot, and, people are breaking in your windows.
It seems that a lot of these gun laws are actually been filed. The bills have been filed by, the same representative out of District 105. It seems like a lot of these the more restrictive gun laws have been proposed by that particular representative, and there's also it looks like there's the same. It seems like the same people are, whether they're for or against the gun, the gun laws. It seems to be the same representatives filing the pro gun or anti-gun bills in the legislative sessions. It looks like, which I think is interesting. It's obviously who people are listening to in their district. I'm assuming. Some of the more rural or more urban districts seem to want the more restricted firearms, and some of the more rural districts are the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what a lot of people have been kind of discussing back and forth about, like, how is this coming up more and more? Well, I think you're seeing, much more of, before Texas was a very rural state, like, and country. Obviously, we had a lot of land and a few people. But more and more, this has become one of the more attractive states in the country to want to live in. And with that, we've had huge increases in our population statewide. So most of these municipalities that, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, even some of the smaller ones, like you're looking at Lubbock and San Antonio and Austin. I mean, these have really swollen over the last few years with an influx of people from out of state for a variety of different reasons. Obviously, our economy is pretty bang up, or at least it was. But we don't have personal income taxes. There's just a lot to be said for the state of Texas and living here. And especially if you're interested in, like we've talked about, firearm, owning firearms, being able to use firearms, carry firearms. And Texas is a very friendly state. But the more that you get an influx from people from other states, you have a shift in this kind of like, public mentality about like what happens. And layer on top of that, these mass shootings that have happened in other states. When you look at all these kinds of things, people using these firearms to do just horrific things to the public at large, then, it really turns to, well, the problem is firearms. The problem is the right to bear these firearms. That's not really it. The problem is with these individuals. But, you see that permeate through these large, densely populated areas that have an influx of people who, maybe weren't raised that way, maybe don't believe that way, and really want it restricted. And so as you see that, you're seeing this more and more from different representatives. I mean, it was, we talked about in our last podcast, this is, a federal representative from Texas is coming in saying like, hey guys, let's put all these additional restrictions on there. And that had never happened, 6-10 years ago. So.
And it just seems to me that, I mean, just to the point of personal privilege here, I guess, it just seems to me that it seems that like this is stuff like we know we can't get around the Second Amendment. So we're going to use everything we can to, basically legislate your ability to get a firearm out of existence, because even though you still have the right to keep and bear arms, we're going to legislate it so much around it. We're going to basically use the exceptions to swallow up the rule, right? That's a common thing in the law, is let's use the exceptions to swallow up the rule. I mean, I think, being a Second Amendment, pro Second Amendment person myself, I think that at the end of the day, we can talk about this, we can go back and forth. If you're in a situation where you use a gun, you're going to be held accountable for it. You're going to be held accountable for when you fired that gun, what you fired at, if someone lost their life, whether that's self-defense, whether it's not self-defense, there is going to be an accountability for it. That's the way our legal system works. So just because you have a law or you have a license to carry doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be, free of responsibility if something bad happens. So, if you use that weapon. So, there's always a rule of reasonableness that goes along with all this stuff if you act in a sensible way. I mean, I understand that, mass shootings are a major problem, and, we got to do something about that. But restricting legal firearm owners who are obeying the law, I don't know there's necessarily a solution to the gun problem. So
yeah, you're not going to get rid of crazy, brother, by getting rid of guns. Like,
right.
You and I both know that crazy does crazy things with swords, with bats, with pipes,
the car,
with poison, with a car. You can get rid of all that stuff? No. What we're really talking about is something completely different, but they want to use it as a tool to really focus on this particular issue and say, well, this is the root of all evil. And it really isn't, to your point. But, I do want to make a quick, reference back to, a lot of the questions that we've been getting from our female listeners about firearms and the license to carry is really like, what good does it do me, right? Like, where can I carry these? Where can I take these, or where can't I is a better way that I always tell them. It's not where you can take it, it's really where you can't. And there's some things that are very specifically laid out in the statute that deals with that I just want to touch on for a second. One is schools. Obviously, you want to keep firearms away from schools. So I don't care if you're licensed to carry, you're freaking open carry, you're not going to take it to your kid's elementary school. So just, be aware of that. Voting, there's some hallowed places where, just having a
Right.
gun, we're already pissed off when we go vote anyways. The last thing we want to do is somebody yelling at you.
Don't bring it to the polls.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to take it there. Government offices, this is some places that, I've represented a couple of people that have run into this issue. They have it with them. They're thinking, hey, I'm just going to get my license plate renewed. And that's government office. Like, all right, I'm going to go drop off, something, a check at the IRS office, or I'm going to the post office to drop off stuff. So, these are simple places that you really just kind of have to be educated. Now, if you're going to get that license to carry, you're going to go through a course. They're going to give you a whole mess load of documentation that tells you, hey, these are all the places that you can carry it, all the places that you can't.
No
Here's
banks.
what's going to happen. Yeah, exactly. Banks, they kind of get a little nervous when they see you walk in with that. So, just make sure, I would tell you, whether you're male or female or anything else, that if you're going to consider a license to carry, that you really need to do a little homework, pay attention in that class. Don't go in there and sleep and think like, hey, it's no big deal. I really don't need to know any of this stuff, because most of those firearm instructors are pretty well versed in the federal gun law, and they're going to tell you, and state law. And they're going to tell you some really good things to know about where to go, where not to go when you're carrying a firearm. So just wanted to make sure.
You need to make sure, like I said, you carry strict liability on that firearm. So, you really need to know the law with respect to when you're going to carry it, where you're going to carry it, and what's
don't take it to the hospital to see the newborn, or you're sick again.
I think, but like you said, as our society gets a little bit more, is getting more and more disconnected from one another, I think you're seeing a lot more, less in some cases humanity, which creates some, which I think kind of permeates some more of these gun issues and things like that. I mean, I think you're seeing people with TikTok videos holding guns and YouTube videos and different things. I mean, having their kids hold guns and different things like that. I mean, it's just not, you want to be a responsible gun owner. I think there's a little bit of reasonableness that goes along with this. And, like I said, what we've heard from our business owners, a lot of them are very, very scared about a mass looting incident or something like that might occur. What are their rights with respect to their guns? If they're a small business and they're about to get burned down, what are their rights? I mean, can you protect your business with the, I guess if you're in the business you can, but if your life's in jeopardy, but you can't just generally protect your business with a firearm.
No, and you do see that obviously when things get crazy. I don't know, you and I both were obviously around when back there was the riots, the riots in LA, and you saw these business owners standing on the roof of their businesses fully armed, trying to say, hey, you're gonna have to come and take it because we're definitely going to defend it. And I think that's really the law that we started kind of talking about at the beginning of this podcast, is like, during these times of emergency, what can business owners do? What can individual owners do to protect their property? And I would tell you that when we talk about a castle doctrine state, it really means that you have the ability to use lethal force in certain instances to protect both person and property. Okay. And then you have what this, so think of the castle doctrine as like your place, your home, your castle, right? And then stand your ground. So you don't have to retreat. You don't have to back up. You don't have to run away and leave it to the wolves to have it. But to your point, Bryan, you're absolutely, any action that you take with a firearm and had better be well justified and well thought out. Because you absolutely are right about strict liability. You're going to get arrested first and foremost. If you use that weapon, just count on it. They're not going to take it from you and say, oh, you did the right thing. Let's let you go home
give you a
and
silver star. Yeah,
that ain't going to happen. The police are going to take you into custody. You're going to go to jail. You're going to get booked. A DA is very likely going to run that through a grand jury to see whether or not your actions were justified and whether they want to indict you to have you go through trial to see if it was justified. But all that being said, if your family's safe, if you're safe because of what you had to do, that's something that you're going to have to put in front of a jury. And you really want to understand the ramifications of pulling that weapon. And that's one of the things they're going to tell you over and over again. If you pull it, you better be ready to use it, because if you don't, whoever you pull it on is probably going to be ready to use it on you. So, these are the kinds of things that people are having to deal with as they consider a license to carry, gun ownership, storing it at home. How do I, to your point, do I show the children, at what age do I start teaching them about firearms? You and I were both, I was introduced to it when I was a wee pup, I was probably 5 years old. First
I mean,
time
I
I
come
held a
from
gun.
my father was in law enforcement. So yeah,
Yeah.
we were taught about them at a young age,
Yeah. So
and how
living
to
on
be
the ranch,
careful with
like,
them, how to respect it.
exactly, because it was a tool, right? A very dangerous but powerful tool, and you needed it. And so, the same thing is really, conversations that families are going to wrestle with at this point. I think, really across the country, but specifically in the state of Texas and the state of Florida, they have to be able to address those kinds of issues and those, really think through that step, which is we have them. What are they used for? And if you do use them, you really got to understand, like, the state's not going to look at you and, like we said, say, hey, good job. They're going to look at you and say, well, now we're going to look at everything that you did and it better
Are
have
you
been
a
right.
criminal? Do
Yeah.
you deserve to spend the rest of your life in prison or worse?
Yeah.
Depending on what happens. Now, I would encourage anybody who's curious about firearms, things like that, or if you're totally against firearms, I would tell you, go to a gun range, hire one of the professionals that work at the gun range. A lot of them are usually either ex-military or ex-law enforcement. Have them teach you about the gun, have them let you shoot the gun, have them learn about guns, learn about gun safety. I think a lot of stuff, a lot of these, especially with respect to Sheila Jackson Lee. I mean, some of the comments this lady was making, I mean, it's clearly obvious she hasn't held an AR-15. They're not 50 caliber weapons. And I don't know if that was a mistake. I don't know if that was a mistake on a press conference or what, but I mean, if you go out, if you're going to be against something, learn about the thing. Go out there, get somebody to teach you about it. I mean, look, for example, in my house, me and my wife, we went to a gun range. We talked to a guy. We had him just go through it with us and say, hey, look, this is a gun. This is how you load it. This is how you unload. This is how you clean it. This is gun safety. This is this, and this is, and because my wife didn't know anything about guns. So I would like better somebody that's a professional teacher than me, because, I don't want her to be scared of the thing. I want her to understand it and know how to use it if she has to. And so we live out near out in the country, so sometimes there may come a time when that's necessary. But it's important to understand the thing. If you're gonna be for it or against it, go out there, take a look, get some experience handling one and dealing with one, and then you can decide, okay, yeah, this is for me or not for me. And I think it's helpful personally.
Yeah, it's without a doubt, it's a skill you need to have. Everyone in my family, obviously, I'm from a military, law enforcement, ranching family. So if you can't use a gun, you're probably not from the family. But I would tell you, like, it's a big responsibility, those types of conversations that you have. And to your point, Bryan, that, there are people out there who own them that don't know anything about them. They don't know how to clean them. They really don't know how to use them. They just think it's cool to have one. In the cases that, maybe they ever have to use it. Hopefully they never have to.
That's probably fine. The person that shouldn't own one. If you don't know how to use it and you just think it's cool to have a Glock sitting there, it's probably,
you see him jump out and be like, I'll shoot you like this. You're not gonna shoot anything. You're gonna miss everybody. But what I'm saying? Like, these are the individuals that we probably want to, really spend some time talking about, the fools who go out and waste money. But, if they would just, to your point, I think, gun safety, gun education, it's something that, it's like we talk about the legislation, right? And the law, there are a lot of people who think they know, but they don't know. And when you really dig into it and learn about it, then it's something that you improve your overall approach towards that particular issue, especially something that's potentially dangerous, and deadly. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, brother. I think that everybody should spend a little time, go out. If you don't like it, that's fine. But at least you've educated yourself, you understand it, you know it, and you can really relate to the conversations that are being had by individuals who believe in it, who want it, and want to have it.
Well, at least you know what's dangerous about it and what's not dangerous about it. Sometimes the fear of the unknown. Don't make a dragon out of something that's a lizard.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I did want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about this. Since we've had some crazy weather, the last couple of days or the last week or so, we've been getting a lot of questions from clients and different people about I had 4 pipes bust in my house, but the utility there was a terribly tragic story about a child in Conroe
I
that died
saw
of
that.
hypothermia. Well, they think it's hypothermia. I'm not 100% sure that the autopsies come back yet or anything like that. But from what I understand, child was out playing in the snow. They have no power in the house. The child comes into the house, goes to sleep that night, and because the temperature was getting very low, the child died overnight, presumably of hypothermia. What obviously the autopsy may not be back yet or anything like that, but that's obviously a terribly tragic and terrible situation. So, what kind of liability do these utilities have? My power was out for 3 days, and then we had a rolling blackout for a day. So, if somebody dies in my neighborhood, or just extensive property damage, we have friends and neighbors who have pipes busted and insulation and roof and sheetrock coming down into their living room or in their bedroom, and all kinds of property damage, flooding, and you name it. We first lose power, then we lose water. We got a lot of upset people, and we got a lot of damage, a lot of money lost.
Yeah, the big problem with that, Bryan, too, is like we've had those conversations with clients, and they're hard because you want to tell them, do you have a case? If it was just anybody other than a utility company that's basically like a municipality, you
sovereign
absolutely have a
immunity.
case. You got sovereign immunity issues, and that means that they cannot be sued. Well, let me rephrase that. They can be sued, but only with permission. Who gives the permission? Well, typically they do, or the government does, and so when you look at it, those are very big hurdles to leap over. And that's the frustration that people are just starting to encounter right now, is all this massive damage, all this money that's going out there, looking around going like, I shouldn't have to pay that. I didn't do this. I didn't cut the power off for, 2 days, even though they could have turned it back on, but they were playing this, shell game of like, who gets it, who doesn't. And then you raise it to the level of somebody who loses a child. My God, you know what I'm saying? Like a wrongful death suit. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in a situation like that. And so is the government going to sit down and say, yeah, we'll pay that claim? We're going to open them up to liability? Maybe in this situation. Obviously, the governor's kind of thrown that back and forth, saying like, if we're going to leave people out on the hook, we're going to open them up. And that's one of those things that, those people who volunteered, because they appear on ERCOT's, not a pay to play board. So basically They're appointed by the governor and they don't get any compensation. I guarantee you those individuals are like, holy shit. The last thing I wanted to do was serve on a board where now I have potential civil liability for actions that we took based on a decision that we thought was, hey, this board was cush. Nobody ever asked, who the hell knew ERCOT a year ago?
I doubt anyone could have mentioned could have explained to us what ERCOT did 2 weeks ago.
Oh, dude, you could have put it on freaking Jeopardy for $1 million. Nobody freaking got it. But I tell you what, like now everybody in the freaking state, if not the country, knows about ERCOT, knows about this board, knows about what things that they made, and everybody is scrutinizing those with the microscope. So, it's a challenging position to advise clients, because you want to tell them like, absolutely, we can do our best and try it.
Would your advice be, if you're going to sit on a board, make sure we're past the 100-year ice storm?
Dude, it's so hard. I would tell you like what I would recommend is, obviously I've sat on
the once in 100-year ice storm.
Those boards. Yeah, I would tell an individual who has the opportunity to do so, to volunteer your time, your energy, your efforts, your talents to the benefit of others, do it. But be educated about it, right? How many times in this podcast do we talk about, hey, do your due diligence, go out and read about it, understand the decisions that you're making, the ramifications that they potentially have before you jump off of that bridge? And that would be one that, especially in a situation like this, I would let people know. But as far as suing them, I'll be honest with you, in this situation, brother, I think more and more we're advising clients, like, yeah, put it down. Let's take our shot. Maybe they say we're not going to open it up, but if they do, you're in line at least to try to get some compensation for what's happening.
More importantly than even just, trying to pin the liability on the utility, which I'm not saying there's not a lot of fault to go around there, but let's talk about, making your insurance claim. Oftentimes insurance companies may not necessarily pay you what what the value is of the property you lost and the damage that was done. So, a lot of people are reaching out to lawyers because, heck, I mean, my insurance company is only willing to pay me X number of dollars, and it's going to cost me, $20,000 to fix, and they're only willing to give me 15. Things like that are even bigger issues that people are going to be dealing with for months and months to come, because, I mean, that happened during Harvey. That's happening now. I mean, you're talking about insurance companies trying to save a buck wherever they can. And,
the largest natural disaster in the state's history. I guarantee you there's insurance companies out there trying to figure out ways to not pay you.
Right. So that's another thing you need. If you need a lawyer to step in, I mean, the important thing I would tell people to do is document everything that happened. If you need to take pictures of all the damage, take pictures of all the damage, get multiple estimates if you can, on what the repairs are going to be, get multiple evaluations of what the damage is, because, I had a client telling me that an insurance adjuster standing in his house and he's saying, well, if I can't see the damage, then I can't pay the claim. So, they have to go rip out a wall to show the insurance adjuster that there's water damage behind the wall.
Yeah, I mean, poke a hole and let the water flow out of here so you can see it as a spigot hose, and then we'll go ahead and rewrite that up. That's ridiculous,
but document everything, because you can't, you got to do your due diligence, and, yes, you pay insurance people to take care of you. And yes, in a lot of instances, they do a very good job, but they don't always do the best job, and they don't always pay you everything. So everything is in this world seems to be negotiable nowadays. So you're better off having more information and being armed with more information about what your damages are, so you can get made whole.
Yeah, not only that, but you have a dispassionate, representative to kind of have those conversations. Because, when you're in that situation, you're pissed off, you're emotional. It's really hard to hear or see really the limitations of your policy, or, what your legal rights are, what potentially you might actually be able to do. Because you could draw a line in the sand and say, I'm not going to take any less than that. The insurance company looks at you and says, well, that's just not the coverage. I mean, I know what you want. You're not going to get it. And then you're in a lawsuit.
You're in a lawsuit, or you don't get anything.
Yeah. And so, really just kind of really get somebody to look out for you, talk to competent counsel, and have somebody really do their due diligence to help you out in that situation.
All right, Sam. So I am in the Woodlands, Texas, and I can be reached at Abercrombie at astxlegal.com. Our website is www.astxlegal.com. We're both on there. Our phone numbers are on there, but my direct line is 281-374-4741, and you can get me anytime. We're going to pivot a little bit next week and go back on some family law stuff, because we haven't touched that in a spell. But how do they get hold of you, Sam?
Well, I'm up in North Texas. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Like Bryan said, you can get all my contact information on our website at astxlegal.com, or you can call me directly at 817-914-5470.
We're also on Facebook and Instagram at ASTX Legal. So we post regularly. So we got, if we see something interesting, or we see something, that kind of looks interesting, or something we want to post about or comment about, we'll throw it out there. So we try to bring content that we can talk to you. If you got a legal question, you got some concerns about something, we'd be happy to talk to you. So absolutely. Have a great weekend, Sam. It was good to talk to you, or have a great rest of your week. And we'll talk to you soon.
As always, brother, take care.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.